Hi, my name's Jamie Bretman. I'm currently CEO and artistic director, as well as a performer for Dummies Corp. That title's changed many times. I used to be executive producer. Before that, I was just artist and performer. And as the company's grown over the last 10 years, roughly, my title has changed. Dummies Corp started out with just one show. It was called Trash Test Dummies, which three of us as mates just started back in 2013, I think, 2013, 2014. We just made a show that we all met at circus school at NICA, which is the National Institute of Circus Arts in Melbourne. And then we just decided to make a show that was fun for us, that we wanted to perform. And we pretty much debuted at Adelaide Fringe, funnily enough. And from there, we got told what the show was because we didn't really know. So we just made a show that was fun for us, and we got told that it was a family show. It had no swearing and no nudity and basically no talking, and it was circus comedy. And so we then started selling it as a kids show as opposed to a circus show. We basically toured Trash Test Dummies for about 4 years. And we pretty quickly, actually through Honeypot, ended up getting a bunch of work overseas. We got picked up to go to Edinburgh Fringe, and we went to a festival in China and Korea, and a bunch of other things in those 4 years. And then we decided it was time to make a new show. We made a second show called Splash Test Dummies. Splash Test Dummies, we started making that while we were still performing Trash Test Dummies. And at that point, we also decided to not say Trash Test Dummies present Splash Test Dummies, which is when we made the new company name and came out with Dummies Corp. And Trash Test Dummies kept getting bookings. So we ended up basically having to recast the first show. So we could do Splash Test Dummies and Trash Test Dummies at the same time, which forced me into a position of producing two shows. And that's how the company sort of started growing from there. After a couple of years of that, we decided we wanted to produce another show as a company and direct it ourselves, and also use our platform. We feel quite privileged to be in the position that we've been in, being touring all over the world. And we decided to employ more women in our company. And so we put together a show. We held an audition for an all-female cast to basically make a show that's similar to ours, which you don't see that much of necessarily in circus and comedy. Women in circus are often it's not always the case, but often they're put into like sexy aerial roles. And we wanted to show that women could be strong and funny and silly as well. So we decided to make another show, which is Don't Mess with the Dummies. All of our shows have won numerous awards and toured all over, well, not all over the world. Some have done more than others. And then we basically spoke to our team and said, we really want you to want to work with us, and what do we need to do as a company to keep you employed? And one of the things that came out of that was that the Trash Test Dummies cast, who were performing the show that we created, they didn't really have any creative control over the show. So we decided to make a new show with them. And we also decided that since we had 3 family-friendly shows already in our repertoire, that we would make an adult show. So we made The Detectives in Cirque Noir, which debuted at Comedy Festival 2021 and has since done Adelaide Fringe and Comedy Festival again this year. Was meant to do Perth Fringe as well, but obvious reasons, the borders closed on us and we didn't get over. So now we have 4 shows in repertoire that that we're managing and touring and thinking about what's next. That's a pretty quick summary of the last 10 years of Dummies Corp.
Fantastic. And yeah, like you say, what next is very much the sort of question on people's lips in some ways. After taking part in Fringe and Honeypot, they start to think about extending their touring networks and locking in potential dates outside of festival seasons. So this presentation is very much about those people that may be looking to lock in tour dates, or those that do have tours already locked in, and we'll discuss more about the things that they might need when on the road. So I guess maybe the first question is if you are looking to lock in bookings and touring dates, what key things do you think presenters really kind of need from the artist and the company?
So I would say before you get to even that place, it's about creating a relationship with the venues and the presenters, because we really pride ourselves on being easy to work with, and it's really important that when you go and work with a theater or a presenter of any kind, that they go, oh, that was really easy, and also the quality of the show was excellent. And they're kind of the really important things I think that you need to have when approaching venues, or sometimes venues approach you. And that even being responsive to emails, I remember at the beginning I would try to get to my emails at least once a day, or sometimes once every 2 days, but now I'm checking my emails all day, every day. And I even had to tell one of the people that worked with us at the time, one of the company members, or the directors, I should say, he only looked at his emails once a week. And I said, you're going to miss a gig, because if they want a response and they've written something to a couple of people, you need to look at your emails every day. So as artists, that's kind of might seem a little bit foreign, maybe not so much this day and age, but basically if you're not onto that side of things, so the administration, the arts administration, which as a small company, no one's going to do it for you, you have to be onto that. So it's about being easy to get hold of. It's about building good relationships with the presenters and building a good reputation for yourself amongst the arts, especially because the arts community is tiny and every presenter knows every other presenter. And if you maybe upset someone or do something that's not quite right, or other people will find out about it, and you're less likely to get work. And I've heard lots of stories of that happening where people say we're never hiring them again, and they talk about it. It's kind of a little bit off topic. Some really important things, first of all, and this was a big mistake that I made. Well, not a mistake, but I basically, the first time we did Trash Test Dummies, first of all, we called it Roadside Rubbish, or Rubbish Clowns, and we got told immediately to change that name. And then I showed someone, I said, oh, this is the image we're thinking about using. And what do you think of it? I spent some time on Photoshop because I had to at the time. And the people's response was, get a designer. And so we went and they recommended someone, and we got a incredible graphic designer that in the scheme of things was really cheap for what you actually get, because we started out looking like a commercial company when we're not at all. We're still not, even though we have, we're still just making ends meet and trying to tour and do all the things and working really hard. But the company, I'll hopefully show our website a bit later, but we look like a very professional company, if not a commercial company. And that's what certain presenters want to see. They want to go, oh, we're hiring a commercial company, and it's all smoke and mirrors. So a big part for us is when we make a new show, we'll always get a really good photo shoot done. And I happen to have one of my best friends as a photographer, so he does a really great deal for us. So if you can find people to help you out with those sorts of things, it's really great. But really good photos straight off the bat, and then a really good design poster artwork. Getting a really good graphic designer is really important. And I'll just show you the imagery that I started with that someone said that is ridiculous. You can see here, this was our first ever image. We were in Gluttony, Roadside Rubbish, 14th Feb. It's a random photo with some terrible graphics. And then someone said, go get a graphic designer. And, oh, I didn't mean to stop sharing. Hold on a second. And, this was our kind of next, well, this is the second cast, but basically you can see the difference between the images I showed you before and the image I got now. And the only difference is that we got a photo shoot and then got our graphic designer to put the stuff on the background. So you can just see the massive difference that you get when you go, I'm going to just make a poster myself, or I'm going to get a graphic designer. And that's something that stuck with me since the beginning, is like, look professional, prioritize where you're going to spend your money. But I think images, they last forever, and it's what you have for the rest of your life, or the rest of the show's life. And it can build over time, but if you have a strong image, again, the presenter's more likely to book you because they can put out your strong image. Strong image, and then strong videos, which is really hard to get until you've done a season. So often we usually try to film in our first season. as best we can. But sometimes, again, most of our videos that we have of the full show are nowhere near as good as the shows are currently, because we did them at our first season instead of filming them 200 shows in, when they're actually changed and developed and much, much better. But the promo videos are great because they just take snippets of the best bits and make it look good, as long as you're, again, you want to try and, depending on the show, be in a venue that has the lights and that make your show look great, which is often hard to do when you're just starting out. I'm going to go into here and just show you a little bit about what, sorry. So if we go here, this is stuff that I'll send to a venue that they will want to ask me. So you can see here, I have like my organization folder, and then I have one for each show. I'm just gonna go into Splash Test Dummies. And then I have this marketing folder, which is actually, could be called all different things. And these are the type of things that I will send out to a venue. So for instance, I have a show copy here, and I have it in short and long versions. So if you look here, I've written 48 words, 315 characters. And the reason I've done that is because often you get asked when you're doing some kind of application, they'll ask for particular characters or words. And so it's really good to be like, I know how many characters and words this is, and I might need to edit it a little bit. And then you can also add that in later as well. Be like, all right, I only need 50 characters, and I'll put that somewhere. So that's really handy, I think, having a show copy. The other document there was actually our company bio, which has a short copy and a long copy. And then I have a variety of images. So I have our hero images for the show, which you can see here. And I have them all both with a logo and without a logo. Is it all right if I don't need to open them all, so you can kind of see, get an idea? So these are our kind of like studio shots, which they'll use for marketing, but often they'll want production shots. They want to see, depending on the venue and things. And so we have, again, we've had a few photographers come to different shows, and then again, out of the thousands of photos we have, I've picked a bunch of photos that I think show the show the best. There's a lot of blue. I also have layered files, which basically means that the venue might want to make a poster out of that's not used by our graphic designer and put their own logos on things, so it's easy for them to be able to move things around, because especially often councils, I was actually speaking to a council in Knox yesterday, and they have the whole council, every single poster has to have the same format. So that's everything from how to put your rubbish in the bin to a show. And that's across the entire council. It's really interesting. So they don't always want our stripes on the back. They just want to be able to pull out the photo and do that. So that's really great. And then we have logos, which is our Splash Test Dummies logo, and then our company logo as well, so they can easily do stuff with that. This is just images at the moment. And then I have some, if we have any random really useful special shots. So we did a photo shoot. This was actually Adelaide Fringe 2018, I think. We did a photo shoot for the advertiser. And I think they used this shot at the end, but they basically took us underground in a car park, put up a blue tarp, and splashed us with water for about 2 hours until they got the right shots. But so these are our special shots that we'll send out for particular things. So for each one of our shows, I have these folders with all of those things in it. Then a media release is really useful to have, even though so this one is actually for Adelaide 2019. So I'll send this to a venue so they can extract information from it to make their own media release. So it's already helping them to have that they have some information already, which is really great, I think. Makes their job easier and makes it easier for them to sell tickets, which is essentially what you want them to be, what you want to be able to provide for them to be able to do, so that they're more likely to hire you again. We then have quotes and reviews. So I basically, as you get your reviews and things like that, you want to be collating them, because later on down the track, the more you can do at the time as it happens, the better. So I've just taken basically pull quotes from every review we get, and then I've got the awards for Splash Test Dummies here, and then I also have all the awards for all of our shows, because it makes you look better. This one is really interesting, a tech writer. The first time I got asked for a tech writer, I didn't know what one was. And so if you don't know what a tech writer is, that's totally fine. Eventually you will. And I basically asked someone else what a tech writer was, and they sent me a copy of theirs, and I more or less copied it to suit our needs, and have developed it over time. And we still work on it. It's a really useful thing, and it's really useful for you to know the information on that. So we basically just have like any company information, who the contacts are, show info and scheduling. So it has all the information about your touring party, your bump in, how long it takes to do things, what your maximum, like we'll do a maximum of 8 shows per week, and only two consecutive show days, 3 consecutive 2 show days. We also run workshops, and we have a whole other documents about the workshops. Any additional notes to do with the show. So like we throw confetti on the audience. We also have a water fight with the audience. In COVID times, we've had to change it a little bit to have less interaction with the audience for now. But all that information can be in here. This isn't up to date, so we don't have anything about COVID in this particular one. But yeah, you have bump in and bump out time, your tech requirements, specifications, so how big a stage you need, what you need on the stage, whether it needs to just be clear, whether you need backline, fallbacks, if you need any DIs or anything like that, you would put all that information in here. So the venue can look at it and be like, yeah, we can cater for this, or no, we can't. And then often it would help to put that certain things are negotiable on here. So you go, this is our ideal scenario. However, we have some wiggle room. So we say minimum 5 by 7 meters stage, but we just performed at Comedy Festival in Melbourne in April for the school holidays, and the stage was about 3.5 meters by 2.5 meters, and we made it work. So this is kind of like your best case scenario. Then you have lighting. So what sort of you really need to make your show run, what kind of rig you need, sound, and then hospitality, which I was like, what, we get hospitality? Yes. Depending on the venue, they will feed you, and you can ask for what you want in your rider. So we say that we need a meal per person, and we put the people's dietary requirements on here, so they know. And often they'll contact us because some venues have never done that before, and they'll be like, is it okay if we just order from the takeaway shop around the corner? And we're like, yep, great. Or sometimes they'll say, actually, we don't provide meals, and we negotiate that. So this is, again, just our ideal scenario. Travel, where we're all coming from, what kind of freight there might need to be. This is a little bit about the workshops at the bottom here and the target audience. So this is a document. It can have more, it can have less, but it basically gives an idea for the venue to really understand what your tech specs are, but more than that, about what your requirements are. So for Trash Test Dummies, for instance, we have a whole lot of consumables. So we need a box of tissues, we need helium balloons. There's all these extra things that we'll request from the venue to provide, especially if we're touring interstate, because taking that stuff is a little bit more challenging. Show copy tech writer. We then have videos. So here I'll have the full length show, links to the videos on Vimeo, promo videos. And in here specifically, I got our videographer to design them. One's just for the internet, and one's actually a square, so it can be used on Instagram and Facebook. They can both kind of be used on both platforms, and it's nice to be able to try and stay up to date with that, because the formats constantly change with what you can put up and how long it has to go for and things. So yeah, that's in there. We also, we happened to do some filming last year and made some digital workshops, so we can send out. These are workshops, like this is how to make juggling balls, this is how to balance things. So just a really handy thing that we can offer venues as well. That was made mostly from during COVID, because we do workshops in person normally, but sometimes it's nice to be able to be like, we've also got these things. I don't know if there's anything in this oh, there is. So this is old, but this is a pitch document which kind of has everything that a venue should want. So it gives you a little bit of the image. Oh, it's not going to load. It's going to load really slowly. This has about the show, audiences, what basically, a bit about the show, a quote, and it's kind of got photos about the company, point of difference. This is, we are currently wanting to upgrade this, but we haven't had the time because we're so busy doing other things. But this was made many years ago. A bit about community engagement. It's sort of like a tech writer in a way, but it's more a presenter pack, whereas it can actually just provide the presenters with some really useful information. Contact us here. Because sometimes the venue will be like, we don't know anything about you. Can you tell us some things about you? And so if you have that document, it's really great to set up. I don't even know what this is. Oh, this is just a pitch document, which just has, so I actually use this for Showcase Victoria. If you don't know what Showcase Victoria is, we should be talking about it. Just some basic dot points about the show and about who we are and what we do. And it's essentially very similar, but it's a little bit more detailed to the tech writer. But again, and the pitch document, they're all really useful documents full of information. So that's our marketing stuff. That is what I, back to the original question, I think, was what information would a venue want? And I think all of that stuff is really useful to have, and it's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. It's something that you collate over time, and you're constantly updating until you get to a point where it's pretty solid. Splash Test Dummies has been going now for, I want to say 4 years, including COVID. We actually were really lucky and toured Splash Test Dummies for 8 months last year, and border hopped and managed to make it through. So all of those documents and images, the better they are and the more easily accessible they are to be able to provide a venue when they say, tell us about your show, the better. Often just sending them a really good promo video to give them the first kind of understanding of it is what I would do, and maybe send them to our website. I might just share again and show our website if you think it's appropriate for right now. Again, the website is essentially the same thing again, just in a more accessible format, I guess. So you can see here we have each show very clearly. Up here we have a quick link to any shows that are upcoming. And then if you scroll down, it has a bit about the company. You can see more of that, our awards. And then we got this video made a little while ago, which has all 3 of our kids' shows as one video, which is really handy. Just gives people a bit of an idea of what to expect when they watch our shows. And then this is a changing thing, and then sign up to our newsletter, and then each show. In each show, I might just go to this one for fun. Straight away, I have our promo video for that show, which I'll just give you a little quick look at before I scroll away. Book tickets, so whatever's going on at the time. Again, this is the show copy, a version that fits nicely in here. Then we show the nice images that we have. Gives you a really good idea of the show, and then touring history. And we actually, I am really happy with this because our designer was really great. Once this event happens and it finishes, it automatically puts itself into the touring history of down here. So you have the date. Once a week after the date finishes, it will just put itself into here. So that's really handy to have. But yeah, again, I might send them straight to be like, you want to see something? Have a watch of this video, and I'll send them here. Have a little scroll down because it has a lot of information, gives a really good understanding of what's going on, and this is what all the stuff that Trash Test Dummies has done. And then all those other documents often are more, once you've had the booking confirmed, they're like, can you please send us your media release? Can you send us the quotes? Can you send us the advertising material? Can you let us know what we need to put on our flyers, and go to contract? Was that too much information? Not enough information?
No, that was great, Jamie. And I think what came out of that really was quite evident that, not all these resources come overnight. They develop over time, but probably, I would say, the marketing, images and collateral is really important to kind of get, produced first, as well as a presenter pack. Obviously the presenter pack and the tech writer are two very different. And obviously I think, getting a really nice presenter pack that's, visually like alluring, has the information that's easily identifiable within it. And yeah,
I think it's really important with those things to really represent your show as well. So we're pretty lucky. We do circus, it's high and it's kids. So it's with those particular shows, it's really high energy, and so the colors are bright. It's got really great imagery and things. So you don't have to have that if your show is not that. You know, if you're a choir, you're going to have very different imagery to the type of show imagery that we have. It's really important, I think, though, to make sure that your marketing collateral is true to your production while still trying to make it look commercial. I don't know why I did that, to look commercial, because it is commercial. It is going to sell. That's the whole point. It's, you know.
Totally. And of course, you want your audience to come out to see the show that you think that they're paying tickets for. You know, if you're presenting yourselves completely different within your presenter pack and marketing collateral, and then when you go on stage, you're a completely different show, then, you know, it's really,
we even, when I was chatting to Knox yesterday, she was saying she hasn't booked some things because they should look at their promo video and they have aerials in them and they can't put aerials. And I said to her, you should always, if you like the look of the show, you should always speak to them and see if they can do it without the aerials, because if they can, you know, it's only one small section of the show possibly, to the point where then she also said, I'd be really good if we did do something like that, that you could actually take the aerial parts out of the promo videos, which does cost a little bit of money, but essentially we were like, well, it'd be great. We'll just replace those clips with something else. And then venues that might be thinking, oh, we can't do that because we don't have a grand piano, or we can't do that because we don't have this, that, and the other. Always really good to sort of let them know what are the non-negotiables, but also what is negotiable. Like, you know, maybe you don't have a grand piano, but you can do it on a little electric keyboard, just as an example. Because I know that that's happened recently.
And do you think it's important to really kind of make it clear that you're adaptable in some ways? You know, obviously presenting everything that you do as a company, but also referencing that there's, you know, there's the ability to adapt and change.
I think that's a bit of a fine line, and finding out what you're prepared to adapt to, because starting out, you sort of go, I want to get every gig up. We can do anything. We can fit in a suitcase. We can fit in a car. We don't even need a car. We'll walk. We'll get it. We'll do it. We'll, you know, and that actually, a venue often wants the best show, not what's going to fit. And so, you know, people have to go, oh, we can just fit in a car. We can come. It's like, well, you don't need to. If you fit in a truck, that's fine too, depending on the venue. And so knowing what it is you're prepared to negotiate on, I think is really important, and building those relationships with those venues, because sometimes it's about getting a little bit of funding, which the venue might get, or you might find a way, you know, Adelaide Fringe gives out some funding if you're making new work, which is, you know, which we received this year, which is really, really great. And so I think that you need to decide, what is negotiable and what isn't negotiable. Just don't assume that the theatre wants you to be able to fit into their mold. Depending on the programmer and who's there, they want the best work. They want to show their audiences really great work. So it's not about you can or can't fit, or we don't have enough lights. You know, sometimes it might actually be the case that you go, well, we really need a follow spot. And so you'll negotiate with them, and maybe they'll hire one in, or you'll make your fee big enough so that you can hire one in and have a follow spot operator. Like if a follow spot's non-negotiable, you make a follow spot always work, and you talk to the venue. I think it's really important to have really good communication with the presenters and say, this is why it's really important to have a follow spot, because this whole section of the show, which is one of our strongest bits, won't work without a follow spot. We have bubbles in our show, and it adds a lot to a particular scene. But if we can't bring our bubble machines because they don't fit on the plane, or because the venue doesn't have them, we won't do bubbles, and that's fine.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I'm so glad that you brought that up. I think, you know, being true to yourself and not you know, limiting yourself for the sake of booking a gig is a really important distinguish to have. And I think your answers about telling people why it works and why it's necessary and having those honest conversations will, in the long run, you know, break down those communication barriers that might be.
I also live by a motto, which is don't be a dick. And I don't know if you can put that in or not, but I think it's really important that when you are having those conversations, it's not about your ego, and it's not about, you know, demanding things. It's about having an open conversation, saying why it would be better and why who benefits from it and why it's a great thing, but not saying, you know, you have to get us this thing, because if you don't, will suffer. And some people don't necessarily know how to communicate well. And I think it's a really good thing to learn and to really think like, could I be approaching this in a better way? And with my non-negotiables, because relationships are everything in this industry.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely. So I guess if we think about the next step, you've kind of locked in a few touring dates with different venues and theaters. But obviously people's, the financial models and the contracts can differ from place to place. I wonder whether you might be able to talk to some of the different sorts of financial models and costs that people should be aware of when they're looking at contracts and discussing further with venues.
Yeah, so for me, I feel like there's two models. One is fee for service. The theatre says we'd like to hire you. We say, great, this is how much it costs. They say, we can't afford that. We've got this much. And you say, okay or no. And then they pay you your fee. You come, they look after everything. They sell the tickets. They make sure the audience is there. They make sure they have the lighting set up for you and all those sorts of things. You arrive at the venue, you bump in, you do your show, you leave, everybody's happy, which is my preferred method. But then you have risk seasons. There's two versions of risk season. So you can, Adelaide Fringe risk season, you come and you get a venue that, you end up giving them a percentage. Basically, you're hiring the venue from in Adelaide Fringe for an agreed upon fee, and then you're in charge of doing all of your own marketing, getting your own publicists, getting your own media, and selling tickets and bums on seats, and that determines what happens, including booking your own accommodation and flights and driving, whatever it is. Whereas often with a bigger venue, especially, like, they'll book your flights for you and set up your accommodation or pick you up from the airport or do whatever it is that they need to do. So you have the festival risk seasons, and then you also have the option of hiring venues straight up. So currently we have someone who's just taken Trash Test Dummies or is about to take Trash Test Dummies in a couple of weeks, and he is doing a complete venue hire model. So he's going to regional towns in Victoria, he's hiring the venue, and he's just spent the last 2 weeks going to each town, putting up posters, speaking to the community, giving out tickets, and basically trying to build audiences on the ground. And he's not a performer, so that's his whole job, is trying to sell tickets to the show. So he's doing that. That's a very hard model if you're an artist as well, because doing all of that and managing the tour and doing everything as well as performing, it's a really big task. But it can be quite lucrative. If you can get bums on seats, you can make really good money. I know some people that will hire really big venues like the Regent Theatre, and they'll do that model as well. They'll spend the money to sell it out themselves, and they make way more money that way than if they get the Regent Theatre to pay for them. And so that's one model. One of the things, and I think is really important to recognize, we swore that we would not do any risk seasons once we got to a certain point. However, someone said to me once, there's 3 really important things, I'm going to try and remember them, that you need 2 of them. Why do I do 3 like that? I normally do 3 like that. Anyway, there's 3 important things. And if you can have 2 of them, it's worth doing the gig. And it was money, experience, and opportunity. So is it worth the money? Is it going to be a good time? Are you going to enjoy it? And could it give you further work or anything like that? And the person who says to me said, as long as you have 2 of those things, it's really worth doing. So for us, Adelaide Fringe sometimes makes us money, sometimes doesn't, but it's always a fun time. It's one of those places where you reconnect with your community. For me, I've been going now since 2014 or 14, however long that is, and I've been to so many of them, to Edinburgh Fringe a bunch of times, and so it's kind of a meeting place of artists from all over the world that do the exact same stuff that we do. And you're often on the road all the time, and so it's a really great place to connect. So the experience is great. Money is sometimes good, sometimes not, but the opportunities are invaluable. So honeypot is one of the most amazing things. I'm not just saying that because I'm here talking about it. It's actually gotten us to Edinburgh Fringe. It's gotten us to Korea. It's gotten us to Sydney Festival. It's gotten us so much work over the years, and that's one of the main reasons we come to Adelaide for Fringe. Is to it's a marketplace. There's other kinds of marketplaces which I think we should talk about as well in a second. But as far as it goes, it's probably the best festival for getting presenters in non-COVID times internationally coming to look at your work, because you can go to other marketplaces such as Regional Arts, not Regional Arts Victoria, Showcase Victoria, which is run by Regional Arts Victoria, and you might get to do a 5-minute presentation where you talk about your show, or you might even get a 15-minute presentation where you show a bit of your show, but it's not the full show and it doesn't give the full image. But at Adelaide Fringe, you can invite people along to come and see your show, and they'll tell you the type of work that they're looking for. So we'll approach anyone that says they're interested in circus, family work, theatre, physical theatre, comedy, and we'll go and chat to them and say, hey, we've got this thing. This is what we've done. This is what we do. Would you like to come and see the show? And it's not about pitching to them and saying, buy our show. It's great. This is the reason why. It's going, hey, how you going? We'd love for you to come and see our show. And maybe it's for you, maybe it's not. And after the show, you ask them, did you enjoy the show? Is it relevant to you? And they might go, it's really relevant, but we're booked for the next 3 years, but let's keep having conversation. And so you put them into your database and you follow them up and have conversations with them. Other people like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And we have a show, we actually have a festival in July. Are you available on these dates? And you start having those conversations. So as far as that risk season goes, going to Adelaide Fringe on a risk, the opportunities are so great that it's always worth it. And sometimes we might only get 1 or 2 things out of it, but we'll always get something. And also sometimes you'll have a conversation with someone 3 years ago, and each year you come back and you say, hey, you still haven't seen our show, and they come eventually, and then it's taken 4 years, but now not only they love your work, but you built a relationship with them over 4 years of harassing them, or getting to know them, and they come and see your show if it's relevant to them, and then they might book you. So it's not always a direct, oh yeah, we saw your show this year and we came straight away, let's book you this year. Sometimes it can take 3 or 4 years, and then you might get a booking. Again, it's about taking time. Do you want me to talk a little bit about the other showcases and stuff? Or
yeah, I mean, we might talk to those after this question, so we can talk about like how you alleviate costs and what funding and showcases that you can take part in. But I guess there's obviously the risk model we were talking about. But what sorts of costs can people expect to kind of incur? From touring the show, the weekly costs, the remounts, freight, travel, accommodation, which you've kind of touched upon a little bit, but specifically, how does it differ from, just one presentation at a festival?
Are we talking specifically if you're doing like a little tour? Or
yeah, exactly. Like if you
I can't give, I mean, there's no point in going into exact figures, but you need to work out how much money you're getting from a venue, and then make sure your budget's balanced. Sometimes, because we're very privileged to have so many shows on the road, sometimes we'll take a loss on one show if we know another show is going to potentially make that up, because we want to keep people employed. So it's better for us to maybe lose a bit of money because we know we've got it coming in somewhere else. So it's not always perfect, but legally, if you're running from a company, the costs, first of all, are, making sure you're paying award wages for touring. So you want to get paid your weekly wages. If you're on tour, per diems, which includes things like laundry costs and services. We are pretty lucky as well. We work our per diems out a little bit differently as negotiated with our employees, but we try to always stay in Airbnbs, which we find are much cheaper than motel rooms, and we always provide food instead of giving out money. So we'll always make sure there's food in the house to be cooked, and basically anyone can have whatever they want within reason from the supermarket, and we bring it home and cook. That includes all snacks and all everything. So it just helps us save some money, but make sure no one goes hungry, to the point where, they can have everything except alcohol. Whatever they want. If they want chips and chocolate and whatever, buy it. we'll pay for it. If a tour is funded, then we would have applied for proper per diems, and then we pay everyone the proper per diems, which is around $350 or $360 a week. I can't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head. So per diems, again, for those who don't know what a per diem is, the living away from home allowance while you're on the road. So you have your wages, your living away from home allowance, your laundry allowance for costumes and things like that. You then need to consider, if you're driving, fuel, car hire. Something that people often don't consider is even just if you're flying interstate and doing it, it costs you to get from home to the airport. So there's a taxi ride, which can be anywhere between $50 and $100 depending on where you live per person, depending on where they're coming from. So if you want to take that into account, I think it's really useful to budget for that. So you have your taxi to the airport, you have your flights, you have the taxi from the airport, or if you're hiring a car at the airport. We've found that hiring cars is often cheaper not from the airport. So if you actually just get a taxi to the closest town or suburb of wherever you are and hire a car there, you'll actually save money. So car hire or truck hire or van hire, or depending on what it is that you need for your touring party and all your freight and props. There's freight. Our shows mostly, 3 out of our 4 shows completely fit on a plane with excess luggage. And if you become an APRA member and get music allowance and fly with Virgin or Qantas, you can get up to 3 bags per person free of charge. So we travel 4 of us with 12 bags or 12 items. A bunch of it goes oversized because it's props and things, but that's a super handy secret tip. Flying, but obviously if it doesn't fit the dimensions and you're taking set, then freight is another story. There's a bunch of freight companies. There's some that specifically do shows and things like that, so set and whatnot. Then you have your fuel, because you're driving, so you need to consider that there's fuel. There's fuel calculators on the internet as well, so you can work out how much fuel roughly how much money you're going to be spending roughly on fuel. So you have taxi fuel, then you have all your accommodation costs, food, accommodation, travel, and if the venues are paying for everything, you don't have to think about marketing. But if you're doing it as a risk season, then on top of that, you have, if you want to get a publicist, any digital marketing, any marketing basically. So printing, all that sort of thing. We also sell merch. We do really well with merchandise, and so we counter to the fact that we might spend $500, a random number, on merch for that particular tour, but we'll make $2,000 off it. Well, it's a random number, so we use that in our budgeting as well. What other costs are there? Anything that are consumables for your show. Like I said, we need to buy, even though we use pretty much a box of tissues per Trash Test Dummies show. If we're on a tour doing 50 shows, that's 50 boxes of tissues. It's $30, $50, depending on what kind of tissues you're getting. So that stuff, it's small, but it all adds up, I think.
And yeah, like you say, it all adds up. And I suppose for some people that can be quite daunting, thinking about all those upfront costs and recurring costs, which may have an effect on whether they seriously consider taking a tour on. But there are.
I'd just like to say on that, and a lot of people get really scared after a first season, so they bring their show to Adelaide Fringe. It's the first time they've done it. It doesn't get picked up straight away, and they go, "Oh, that's it. It's not going to work. I can't afford it. It's not going to happen." So I'd just like to remind people that the first year that we did our first show, we lost about $2,000. However, we also didn't pay ourselves any wages, so technically we lost way more than that. We all just saved up our own money, and we actually borrowed $10,000 to try and make it happen, and we lost $2,000. I think the company paid for food, but we didn't get any wages or anything like that. We lost money on the first one. The second year we went, I think we paid ourselves about $500 a week as wages, and maybe not food. So we just each got $500 a week. And everything else covered, and we just covered our costs. And then the following year, I'm pretty sure we made a little bit of money. However, from doing that, each year we got a bit more work, we got a bit more known, we got a bit more recognized. It doesn't happen overnight, and you really got to persist. I know quite a few people that keep making new shows because they think, oh, it didn't work, I'll just make another show, it'll be better. I'm like, no, sometimes shows take time to run in. I think you need to perform your show 100 times before it's actually like really good. It might be a great show straight away, but once you've done it 100 times and you know it inside out, it's going to be better. And sometimes it also might be the fact that the time the presenter came and saw your show, you had a small audience, or you were off, or heaps of reasons. So the first time it might not work. And I think it's really important to not give up and just say, and ask for honest feedback. Ask people like, what did you like? What didn't you like? How am I going to make it better? I think it's really important to, know what your worth is and know what your art is, but also get feedback and listen to people. If you keep getting the same feedback, then it's probably true. If you think some part in your show is really good and everyone keeps telling it up, it's actually not the strongest. Maybe you should reconsider it. And I had that happen where we had a bit in our show that I loved. I'm not going to mention it, what bit it was, but everyone keeps saying, why are you doing that? And I said, because I really want to. It's really important to me. And eventually we had an outside eye come and watch it, and we just agreed that we would do whatever they said. And they said, you got to take this bit out. And we took it out, and it was a million times better. And so sometimes you just got to let go of those things and know why you're there, know what you want, but also, again, know what your non-negotiables are, but also listen to feedback and take feedback. It's kind of unrelated, but I think when we started out, especially, I used to often speak to producers who were way ahead of me and say, hey, can I take you out for coffee and ask you millions of questions? And everyone who I asked was like, yeah, of course. And so I am an open book like that. If anyone ever wants to sit down and have a chat, have a Zoom, have a coffee, ask questions, I think most people in our community and in our sector would happily sit down and have a conversation with you about your show, about anything that you're struggling with. Maybe it's accounting that you don't know how to do. Maybe it's, you want help with the website. Like, I designed our first website and made it myself using Wix. Compared to what we have now, it was horrible, but I had to learn how to do that. And asking people who have experience is really valuable. And I used to go to them and say, I just want to make sure I don't make the same mistakes you make. Which I didn't know what their mistakes were, but it's like, you can probably stop me from going down a stupid path that's going to end up being a problem. Ask for help and ask for advice, ask for feedback. There's plenty of people around, and even busy people can find half an hour in their month to help you. And if they can't, they're probably being a dick.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that, actually. I mean, I think it's really important to really kind of clarify that it's a long game sometimes, and not to be put off by the challenges at the beginning and throw it all in the bin just because of those things. But there are also there's also funding and assistance that people can kind of tap into. We briefly spoke about showcases in other markets, so I just wonder whether you might have some insight into those types of courses.
I'll break it into two things a little bit. I think it's really important because we did mention showcase, but for those who don't know what showcase is, there's a few of them. There are performing arts markets. There's a bunch of them. There's international arts markets as well as local arts markets. So Showcase Victoria is the Victorian version run by Regional Arts Victoria, where it's a whole day with different components. This year, it didn't have any pitching, but it had speed dating. So you got to pick 9 people you thought were relevant to you. They sent out lists to you, and then you got to sit down with them for like 15 minutes and have a conversation about your work and what it is they need. And a big part of that is about finding out what the venue wants, because maybe you shouldn't try and want to perform in a venue that actually doesn't want you or isn't suitable for your work or doesn't have the audience that's going to enjoy watching your work. So those, there's like, I don't know if SAPA is still around, but that was the South Australian version. There's Art Tour, there's Regional Arts WA do something similar. I don't know what theirs is called. Basically, arts markets are really great. And often, so with Regional Arts Victoria, they basically, once the day is finished, they send out a survey to all of the venues, and the venues basically tick a yes or no to the shows that they might want to use, and then Rav will then basically pick the top 10 roughly who had the most interest and apply for funding on their behalf through Creative Victoria, and then coordinate and organize the tour for that company. Again, we applied for Showcase Vic about 4 times before we got any kind of pitch, and we've had 1 successful, or maybe 2 successful tours with them, supported by them. But we've also made loads of connections again with other venues who we just went and did it ourselves and contacted them directly and got tours off our own bat instead of being supported by them. In saying that, if you're a Victorian artist, Creative Victoria have funding rounds for touring, and they, I can't remember exactly, but they'll basically cover touring expenses. So if you're successful with them, if you have a tour lined up and a bunch of venues have agreed to take you, and you've got a good budget and you've got good reason and good artistic integrity, and you're successful, they will fund things like your per diems, your even a driver's allowance, which is like $17 a day per person that's driving. There's like the accommodation, the travel, they'll basically support that, because often the venue fees aren't enough to fully cover your tour properly, and so there's these funds out there. Playing Australia is another one, which is run by Australian Council for the Arts, AUSCO, which we have been successful with twice. We have been going for 10 years, I'll say, and we got our first ever funding a year ago or 2 years ago. So again, you got to keep applying and you got to keep doing. And also there's heaps of seminars on how to apply for funding and things, which I never have the time to go to, but ones that I have been to have been really helpful to explain that it's actually not that scary. You don't need to know any particular lingo. You just need to be able to get your message across and why it's useful. So keep trying. Also get help from people. There are plenty of people out there who write grants for a living, or who, have seen and read a lot of grants. So get people to read over your things. Playing Australia fund you for any regional touring that you do outside of your home state. And in fact, I think at the moment they're also funding some stuff if it's in your home state, as long as you're also doing other states, and that's a COVID thing. But that basically, that funding, again, same stuff, covers per diems, it covers all of travel expenses. It doesn't cover wages, but what it does do, it also covers some administration costs. And the more regional you go, the higher the administration costs they give you are. So there's these different ratings from 1 to 4. I think it's like regional, remote, very remote, and extremely remote. I can't remember what the actual things are, but you get a certain amount of money per venue that you can apply for within this grant. And the more regional and remote you go, the higher that figure is. So it encourages you to basically go take your show far and wide. We haven't done a lot with funding. We haven't really applied for a lot. We haven't been very successful until this last couple of years. But we've done so much touring that we kind of got to the point where we're like, I think we're ready now that we know what we're doing and we can prove that on paper. And so, yeah, we got Playing Australia to tour Splash Test Dummies in 2021. It was something like 50 venues, 40 workshops, 3 internships. We basically had COVID 2020 to create this tour and apply for the funding, and not much else going on because we were all home. We were successful with that. And then we applied to do the same tour with one of our other shows, and we got knocked back. And then we reapplied for a smaller section of that tour, and we were successful with that. So it's, we're still unsuccessful. Sometimes you're successful. Sometimes you don't know why. Sometimes you do. Funding can help, but also it's not the only way to do it, I would say.
Yeah, great. And I mean, I think, it's just nice to know those sorts of resources and types of bodies are available to kind of check in with, and obviously, keep applying and keep trying. But it's just good to know that they're out there.
And also, if you're more regional, there's often more grants in regional areas, and so to have a think about that, depending on where you live. I live almost regional. I'm about 50k from being less. I'm about 10k from being classified as regional, so I just miss all those grants. But if you do live regional, it's really helpful.
Yeah. And there's also local council grants as well. You should also just check in with the local councils and government bodies in the towns and cities that you're looking to take work to as well, which is always something that people aren't too aware of sometimes. They just think that, the big, government bodies are the ones that provide funding and budget relieving.
They often provide the funding for the councils, and then the councils can distribute it. So it's quite interesting. I also at a Showcase Victoria maybe 2 years ago, because I just moved to where I live now, which is in the hills in Melbourne in the Dandenongs, and I met with some guy. I think his name's Malcolm, off the top of my head, but he's basically in charge of the Yarra Ranges and the arts and what happens here. And when he found out I lived out here, he's like, "Oh, there's heaps of random opportunities. We're trying to do things. We'd love to, And I went and just met up with him. We just sort of discussed what opportunities might be useful that we can do out here. And it's not even necessarily to do our show, but it was building a relationship with him to be like, yeah, it'd be great to, maybe we'll run some kind of activity, or we'll teach a workshop, or we'll, get a few different venues, or maybe we'll do a little tour of a bunch of shows out here.
We might just sort of talk about the next step, which might be in terms of developing audiences and getting ticket buyers to the shows. And moving around on a tour can sometimes be, I guess maybe some people might not be aware of what the responsibility is of the theatre that's booking you versus your responsibility. Like, can you give us maybe some insight into the sort of challenges and insights into sort of developing audiences when you're moving around?
That's a tough one, because we don't do it very much in terms of when we get hired by a theatre. We let them deal with that. However, we are a partnership, so we make sure that we provide them with all of those marketing materials that I got. And sometimes it might be a bit low, and if we can afford it with the fee, we might be like, okay, we'll put $100 into some digital advertising from our end to help to see if we can do it. We only in the past year or so have started collecting emails from our audiences. And we actually were really lucky that Adelaide Fringe and Perth Fringe and Melbourne Comedy Festival all keep a database of anyone that bought a ticket that ticked the box and said, yes, they're happy for us to have their information. So start doing that early. As soon as you finish a festival, contact the festival and get that information. In fact, I think at the moment, Adelaide, through Red 61 or whatever it is, the ticketing system, you can actually pull a report that has those email lists. You don't even have to contact the festivals anymore. You can actually get a report yourself. But by building those audience lists of people who have seen your shows and keeping them in a place where it's like, these are all in WA, these are all in Queensland, you can actually then support your venue to say, well, I've actually got 50 email lists of people who've seen our shows before around your venue. Let's send out an email to them and let them know, or that sort of thing. Often I find we try to give out advertise to local communities by offering free tickets. So because we do circus, if we're near somewhere that has a local youth circus, we'll be like, hey, we're going to give you guys a family pass to give out to some of your students, but also can you please put us in an email blast, that sort of thing of a touring route. But generally speaking, the theatre has a network, and they, people who go to their theatre often will come and see the show. So it's more of them. And sometimes we'll be really remote. And recently we did a show, I think, for like 15 people, which is not ideal. The venue wasn't happy about that, but especially during COVID time, it's been really hit and miss. I also heard, I think it was possibly in Bendigo or somewhere, where like one night there was a completely unknown show that sold out, and then I think Jimmy Barnes played the next day and it was like 20% full. It was like, at the moment we just don't know. what to expect. So yeah, it's a hard one for me to speak to building audiences on those sorts of tours because the venue does it.
Yeah, and I think that's great to be honest up front about that. And it's if that's the case, then that's something to be considered. And I suppose this is a good segue into the next question in terms of other challenges and roadblocks that you might encounter when taking on a tour. From your experience, what types of touring challenges could people potentially be faced with, and what do you think some of the best ways of preparing for those might be?
I find that question a little bit difficult to answer. The reason for that is because I don't really find things in my mind challenging. That might sound a bit strange, but I always just take things on and do the work and do the thing. Some of the things can be the touring party. You're living in each other's pockets, you're living in each other's house, you're living in each other's things. So we started implementing weekly check-ins with our group. So we have a day off. We make sure there's a day off on a Monday usually, and Monday night after dinner we'll sit down, and it's an opportunity to without having personal attacks or feeling personally attacked, even though it is a little bit, it's saying I'm feeling that this is particularly challenging for me. And that can be anything from like every time you wake up in the morning and you make a cup of tea, I can hear the slamming of the cup, those sorts of share house type things. But, you all live your own lives. When you're on tour, you're all of a sudden living in each other's pockets. So having open discussions around those little things, it's not like, I hate you, this is a thing. It's just, this really upsets me and I find it really challenging because I like my sleep and I keep waking up when I'm not ready to wake up because of this particular thing. Or it might be, this thing happened on stage the other day and I felt unsupported in that particular moment and I just wanted to share that so it doesn't fester. So having those kind of open lines of communication and check-ins, I think is really, really important for avoiding major conflicts within a touring party. Because again, you are having long days, you're doing shows, you're bumping in, you're bumping out, you're exhausted. You might only be able to eat a meat pie that day because that's the only thing that's on the road. I guess that's a challenge. Checking in with the towns that you're going to be like, what is available at that town, because there might be nothing. So you need to prepare in the previous town and go to the supermarket and stock up on things that you can eat without having to cook them in the next town. Or it might be that there is stuff in the next town, but actually your show's on at the same time as the restaurants are open and the restaurant closes before you finish your show and you come out and you don't have any dinner. That can be a bit of a problem. Yeah, we don't really encounter lots of problems. I mean, it really depends. Last year in WA, there was some flood, so we almost didn't make it to a venue because we had to drive around an extra 10 hours or something ridiculous to avoid the floods. But there's things that are just unavoidable. But challenges, I mean, depending on the touring you're doing, it takes a few tours to get used to touring. Getting up early, checking out of the accommodation, getting in the car, driving all day, arriving at the place, checking into your new accommodation, going straight to the venue, doing a 4 to 8 hour tech, then doing a show, then finishing the show, being on for that whole time, and then just wanting, to either have a beer after the show or to just go home and sleep. And the other guy wants to go out and party and you've only got one car between you or whatever, like there's all these things that you just have to find the balance of what you're doing. I don't know if it's quite the same with all other kind of performing, especially with circus, we're so physical that especially sometimes you do a 2-show day and a workshop in the middle. So you arrive at the venue in the morning, you bump in, some venues, we take our own sound and light. So you're setting up sound and lights, you're doing your tech, then, maybe we haven't got enough ticket sales. So you might go out and do a little bit of flyering to help the venue do some tricks. Then you do a show, then you teach a workshop, then you do a second show, then you have to bump out of the venue, and then you are completely stuffed. And so people have short fuses at that particular time, but try not to, you just have to. And sometimes it's about letting the other people in the party know, say, hey, I'm really exhausted. I know we all are, but I'm actually feeling like I have a short fuse at the moment. being really open. And that goes to mental health as well. Like sometimes being able to say, hey, I'm feeling really anxious today, just so you know, if I snap, it's not because it's personal. I'm in another part, I think it's really important to have those open lines of communication. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not. I'm just sort of rambling.
No, I think actually that's kind of exactly what I was looking for. I think, it's really easy to sort of plan and navigate some of the more obvious challenges, budgets, costs on the road. But actually, what you just described, it's those things that you don't necessarily plan for. It's it's living, out of each other's space for a long period of time. It's mental health check-ins. It's geography of where you're traveling to and from, and being able to adapt to the geographical challenges that you might have got. It's knowing where your Airbnb is in relation to the supermarket to get some milk should you run out. I think you've answered it kind of exactly how I was.
Okay, great.
Delivering it really, which is essentially it's a human connection. It's a mental health consideration that all needs to be taken into consideration, I think.
Yeah, and we do things as well, like depending on the touring party, it might be like we do show notes really well right after the show. Other touring parties, like we'd like to do them the next day in the morning, so we can not have just finished the show and be in that space. So it's having those conversations, be like, when is the best time to do this? And again, if you do finish the milk the night before, that's not a problem, but maybe let people know that they're going to wake up in the morning to no milk, because then you have, just by knowing that there's no milk, like you're saying, then you're prepared to wake up in the morning. You might be able to look up what time the supermarket opens and know that you're not having a cup of tea before that time, even if that's your routine. And, we are creatures of habit, so it can be really annoying when you get up and you're like, I'm just going to have my morning cup of tea, hot water with no milk. Yeah.
And I think those little tips and suggestions are really, really quite interesting. Having that sort of check-in on a Monday or something, or just flagging if you're in a susceptible mood. I think all those little, tips and things.
That mood one's a new one for us because it came up a little bit recently, and it makes all the difference, because what it means is if I say to the team, I'm feeling really low energy today, I don't know why, or I do know why, I don't want to talk, whatever, immediately everyone becomes more sensitive and they're more likely to be like, you know what, you don't need to bump out today. Maybe you just need to go for a walk, or go sit in a park, or go do your thing. We've got this. And that's really supporting your group. But if you don't have that conversation, then you might be bumping out aggressively and throwing things around, or you might just, making everyone else feel uncomfortable and not saying anything. So everyone else feels like, oh, he seems like he's in a bad mood, or they seem like they're in a bad mood and we don't know why. Is it us? And then you start thinking, have I done something wrong? And it just creates a horrible thing. But if they say, nothing to do with you, I'm having a bad day, then you can, if the group all agrees, you can say, hey, you go have some food, go sit down, go have a cup of tea, go, and they might say, no, I'm okay. I'm just going to do it grumpily. But it's not about you. Just know it's not about you, being able to support each other. Because then when it might be you in the other position, then that you can say, oh, I'm feeling like this. Do you mind if can I not do that particular task? Or it's really important.
And this maybe probably leads into one of our last questions, really. And we're trying to end on a negative. I'll try and think of something to ramp it up at the very end. But I mean, obviously there are unforeseen circumstances, health, something being cancelled, or freight not getting through in time. If you do need to sort of cancel an upcoming gig or part of a tour, what's the best way of approaching that, and what
I think it's really important that in your contract, because for years and years we just took the venue's contract, and then in the last couple of years we've had our own contracts made up, so it's on our terms instead of their terms, which the terms are very, very similar. But some of the really important things is we always get a 50% fee up front, and that is non-refundable. Unless there's a force majeure or something like that where it's agreed upon. But the key is that in the contracts, it always says, first of all, we'll try and do the show. If we can't do the show, we'll try and reschedule the show. If we can't reschedule the show, we'll offer a full video version to the venue. If we can't do that, you try to find a bunch of different options, and then if you can't come to an agreement, then you cancel. And especially during COVID, we got used to cancellations. So it definitely happens. Or, you know, I had a whole 2.5 months booked in WA regional touring with Don't Mess with the Dummies. And I even planned to fly them to Tasmania on the 14th of December, because that's when the borders opened from Tasmania to Melbourne. And they were going to spend 2 weeks in quarantine in Tasmania because WA had their borders open to Tasmania. And then on like a few days after the borders opened up to Tassie got like 1 or 2 COVID cases, and WA shut the borders, and that stopped our entire tour from happening because we couldn't get into WA. And so all of those venues I had to contact and say, hey, we'd love to reschedule for next year. And so now we've got the same tour, but it's in 2023. And hopefully borders don't close. Some venues have said, oh, actually, no, we can't because we're renovating our venue at that time. And so that just gets cancelled because obviously it's unforeseeable. However, it also gives me another year now to see if I can add some other venues so I can spend some time and fill in some gaps and have those conversations and make it even better. So I try to look at the positive on it. Be like, oh, what can we add? How can we make it better?
Right. Yeah.
Make sure you have a day off and that you pay attention to big days, because our first tour, we actually had some days where it was like, get up, drive 8 hours, go to bed, get up, drive 8 hours, bump in, do a show, bump out, drive 2 hours, sleep, get up. And then we didn't have a day off for like 13 days in a row. We just didn't realize until we were on the road that had happened. But now we're very conscious. We pretty much try to go every Monday as a day off. And if we can't have the Monday off because it's got to be the gig or it's got to be this, we'll then make Tuesday the day off. We'll just make sure there's at least one day off a week. And that includes a day off is not a travel day. A day off is you don't have to get up if you don't want to. Yeah.
Wise words indeed. Wise words indeed. We've not really touched upon sort of international bookings, but we might just very briefly just talk about international touring dates or bookings and how they differ. And, you know, with everything now opening up and people probably are looking towards taking their work abroad again, from your experience, like how does that differ, and what new considerations do you think people should be aware of, if anything?
Well, there's visas, first of all. Depending if you go to tour in the States, the visa process is quite difficult, and you often need the venue to help you to basically say, yes, they're coming to do this one-off thing. And it's a bit of a process. Other places like Edinburgh Fringe is super lucky. It's visa free. So you can go to Edinburgh Fringe. You don't need to apply for any kind of working visa. Anyone can go and work at Edinburgh Fringe, which is awesome. I mean, we've been to 13 different countries, and I would say all of them have come out of either Adelaide Fringe or Edinburgh Fringe. So someone saw us at Edinburgh Fringe. We had a meeting with them. They liked the show. They booked the show. It's been so long and since we've done international travel, so it's a little bit challenging. But one of the differences I would say is that overseas often they're booking 2 years in advance, whereas in Australia it tends to be a yearish in advance. However, since COVID, there's a lot of rescheduling going on in Australia, so some places are booking 2 or 3 years in advance. I'm speaking to a Canadian kids festival, and we're talking about 2024. So that, when I first started out, that idea to me was ridiculous. That you know, we had the one show that we performed a couple of times, and then I was at Showcase Victoria, and they were talking about 2 years, in 2 years' time, booking things, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing in 2 years' time. How can I possibly agree or look into that? But now I go, oh yeah, we need to book at least a year, and often 2 years in advance. 3 years is a bit ridiculous, but sometimes you have a conversation with someone and they say, we love what you do, but we are booked for the next 2 years, so we'd love to chat about later.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we've covered quite a lot there, Jamie. Certainly, what I got out of it, obviously, was you're building that portfolio of collateral over time. It's, you know, small things to take into consideration versus the larger things to take into consideration is really important. Not to be disheartened and give up. There's lots of help out there. Talk to your peers.
I was going to say on that, I am very happy for you to share my email. And if people email me saying, I would love, this is who I am, this is what I do, I'd love to have a chat. And I would endeavor to respond, and happy to, have conversations with people.
Great. Appreciate that. Well, yeah, we'll probably do that when we pass this through the comms at the end of the month. But yeah, unless there's anything else that you think we've missed in this kind of overview of taking your work on the road.
No, I think it's pretty well covered. I mean, arts admin is a real thing. And although I do what I do because I love being on stage, I love making people laugh, and that fills me with great joy. That's what I'm passionate about. It feeds my ego, makes me feel good. And the more I do it, the better I get at it. I wouldn't be able to do any of it without the administration that we do, which sometimes is more than the performing we do, depending on the time of year and what's going on. In fact, often it is. So it's obviously, if you only have one show and you're just an artist and producing that and going on the road with that one, it's a little bit less, but the more you do, the better. There's also cold calling is not a bad thing. They talk about like door-to-door sales as, in every 100 no's you get a yes, but that does really well. Same thing here. The more you cold call, send out emails, make phone calls, if you want to try and get bookings, you might get a lot of no's for a year or so, but you keep doing it, and eventually it slowly builds and adds and builds and adds and builds and adds. And also you might speak to someone at one venue. So we did our first paid show at Shirley Burke Theatre in Kingston in Melbourne. And the person that hired us for that, her name is Marissa, and she now works at Gasworks, and now we get work at Gasworks too. But we also get work at Shirley Burke because of that. So people move around within the industry as well. So you might speak to someone at one particular venue and they might be like, oh no, we don't take on that kind of work. And then they're in a new place and you call them again, it's the same person. They go, oh, actually, that's exactly what we're looking for. So yeah,
that's probably a good way to end, really. I think that's something that is good to take away in terms of, brokering those new connections is those relationships take time, and sometimes, they might develop over a few years, and your bookings might take, like you say, bookings in 2024, 2025 aren't uncommon, or the person that you spoke to has moved to another venue and actually all of a sudden it's quite relevant, and you've already built that initial contact and relationship through previous conversations. So
it's all about
just
relationships.
chipping away, I think, is probably the takeaway from this. Build your portfolio, make the
have a good show and make sure it's a good show. Ask people.
Make sure it's a good show.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard one, but I think it's really important to ask people for actual feedback about your show, and don't just take one person's advice, because they might say something you disagree with and you might be right and they might be wrong. But if you're getting the same feedback from multiple people, I said this earlier, but I think it's really important that people are going to want to buy your show if it's good. And some venues are really into experimental work, and so if it's good experimental work, then it will get booked. Some people really want just really entertaining kids shows, which is what we do. And we spent a lot of time doing it. Like when we first did Splash Test Dummies, I wasn't happy with it for a really long time, and it was evident by the amount of bookings we were getting. And then eventually it settled in, it became a thing, and now people love it. It's great. Just it takes time, and just keep at it.
Well, actually, one more question. I'm just intrigued as how does a show develop on the road? Is that something that happens? Where you kind of, that didn't really work in that town, and that didn't really work here either. So maybe is there like almost like a creative development sometimes when you take a work on the road?
So the type of work that we do, 100 billion% yes, and that is because we have a show that's a skeleton. It's highly interactive and heavily rooted in in clowning, I guess. And what that means is there's always room to try something, to make a joke, to do a funny thing. And sometimes we've found, especially on the road, as you have your show like this, and this is funny, this is funny, this is funny, this is funny. Okay, it goes like this. But on the road, this is funny. And then I do something here that's really funny, and everything stays the same. And I keep doing this thing that's really funny, and it always works. But over time, this really funny thing gets better, which actually ruins a funny thing over here. And this stops being funny. And so you have to, you are actually constantly adjusting until you get all of the things line up and be really, really funny. And sometimes you'll do one thing, you'll be improvised, it'll be really funny, and then you'll try and do it every show after that and never get the same laugh again, and say, all right, I'm cutting it. And then you sneakily try it again, and then you try it again. And after a few shows, you go, it's not working. I got to stop doing that particular thing. But we also will do that. We'll try things, and then we'll always talk about it. We'll always have a show notes and try to fix it. And often we'll do, which you mentioned before, but we didn't actually talk about, a remount or a redevelopment once it's been on the road. And we go, oh, this bit's not quite hitting. Like the rest of the show feels like it's great. And then we get to this point and it just has a moment that's not quite working. So we'll go and workshop it. We'll probably get an outside eye in or a director to come and help us fix that particular thing. But even now, like Splash Test Dummies has, like I said, done 300-400 shows. And every show we come off stage and we go, oh, you did this thing that was really fun. It was really different the way you looked in that direction at that particular time, or this one thing you might have said, or this thing you did with your body, or this stuff. So for us anyway, we're always trying to make it better. We're always developing it. And the way the show is at the start of a tour compared to the end of the tour is, I mean, audience might not know the difference, but it's definitely evolved and developed and changed. We've cut things out, we've added things in, we've switched roles around, we do all sorts of things on the road. But like I said, our shows are interactive comedy, clowning, there's always little spots where you can improvise. And sometimes we'll do something and it'll be not funny at all, and we'll either break character and laugh, or just straight out say like, well, that didn't work, and the audience is on side with us, and then we get back into it. So it's yeah. But I don't know for other art forms if it's as simple to be able to, throw in a couple of extra pirouettes over here if you're doing some kind of dance show, or I don't know how it is. But I know that like Circa, who are one of Australia's, largest circus companies, they often have an on-tour director while they're doing shows. And so they'll get notes from their tour director every show. Mm-hmm. So it might be tiny, might be little things, but it's always working on it, making it better, doing different things.
Great. Perfect. All right. Well, listen, I mean, we could have gone on and on talking about, various...
Yeah, I'm talking about my life, so of course I can...
You've been very candid today, very, very honest, some great information, some great tips, and some great thoughts to consider, I think. And hopefully when people look back on this, there's some really sort of important segments of information that they can pull from this and start.
I find it really interesting because when you say to me, can you come and talk about things? And I'm like, I don't know anything. It's a weird thing to know that I have so much knowledge about. But I remember, must have been like 6 years ago or something, there was a honeypot session and it was about touring regional, and at that point we'd barely done any regional touring, and I can't remember who asked me. Maybe it was it Greg at the time? Not Greg, Craig, was he doing it then? I can't remember, but someone said, can you come and talk on this panel? And I was like, I mean, I'm happy to talk, but I don't really know anything because I haven't done much. But once I sat on the panel, I was like, and like the person who asked me to do it knew that I knew more than I knew that I knew. Yeah.
And it's amazing how much people learn on the job. And when you ask them, do you know about this or this, or what's your experience of this, they actually have a wealth of experience that they've already accumulated, and it's about taking that experience and just running with it. Great. All right. Well,
Awesome.
thanks so much, Jamie. It's been wonderful talking to you, and
Pleasure.
be great to really sort of drill down into some of these interesting components of taking the work on the road.
Yeah.
So.